thank you from my heart, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you from my heart, from the bottom of my heart.
When's the right time to just sort of say to somebody, I think you're great, and this is why I think you're great. I think certainly in the UK, I think people would look at you a bit strange if you just had that conversation kind of randomly in the middle of the day. But when there's a special occasion like somebody's birthday, a major birthday, or a leaving, they're moving to a new job, or they're retiring or something like that, then we can mark those moments in time with an opportunity to say, let's take stock and let's share the things that make you so special. Because the reality, of course, is that so often these are the things that are said at someone's funeral. And that just seems like such a waste, doesn't it? That it's only in those moments when these things are said. And you just know that so often the person who's died never heard those things, or certainly not in the way that it would be shared. So I love the fact that we're creating ways for people to hear this stuff and realize how much they're loved while they're still here to appreciate it or benefit from that appreciation.
Welcome to the Gratitude Podcast on www.georgianbenta.com, where you'll hear a new story each week that will inspire more gratitude in your own life. Our mission is to inspire 100,000 people to discover how to feel gratitude and live a happy life through the amazing life stories of our successful guests and their actionable tips. And now, the host of our podcast, Georgian Benta.
Hi, Gratitude Seeker. Welcome to a new episode of the Gratitude Podcast. Today with us, we have a business psychologist, a director of the Work Positive and co-creator of At My Best Tools, a person who's been doing some great work in helping people be at their best at work, but not just at work. And we will be talking about his experience as a psychologist with gratitude, and also one of the amazing tools that he has created that I'm really excited about, and I'm sure that you will be as well. Welcome, Martin, to the Gratitude Podcast.
Thank you. It's really good to be here.
So let us know a little bit about Work Positive, a little bit more. From my knowledge, you're using positive psychology to help organizations, but I think it's something really interesting that in the way that you're implementing this, and I would love for our audience to find out more about this.
Yeah, sure. Well, as I say, it's good to be here. So as a psychologist, for a number of years now, my focus is working in organizations. So we sometimes work with individuals, but often it's with managers and helping them to bring the best out of the people that they lead. And sometimes with organizations at the systemic level around how do they create structures and processes that enable people to be at their best. So it's kind of a cool job to have, isn't it? To help people to make the most of their strengths and to be at their best in what they do, because we all have times when we feel like we're really performing at our best and really flying and doing things that we love. And there are times when we don't feel like that. So if we can help people to just move a little bit in the right direction, then it can make a big difference to how we feel and to our productivity and those kind of things. So, so that's what we do. And in reality, often that's around delivering workshops and coaching and things like that. But increasingly, we're working and supporting other coaches and facilitators to help them in the work that they do through the tools that we've been creating.
That's wonderful. And I'm very curious, the perspective that you have on gratitude. Like, how does gratitude feature in your work?
It's really important, actually. I mean, it's one of the things that I think from a positive psychology point of view, it's one of the kind of tools that we have available to us to help people to develop practices which actually they can relatively easily implement, or very easily implement into their day-to-day practices. either individually or in terms of their role with others, in terms of, for example, the questions that they're asking other people, can be hugely powerful. We move in the direction of the questions we ask. And so if we're asking questions that are more appreciatively focused and helping people to notice what's working well and what they've got to be grateful for, then those things can have a big impact, because so many organizations and managers are focused on what's not working, and how do they fix things? Where are the problems? And that can lead to a mindset which is actually very focused on the detriments of our situation. It gets harder to focus on what's working well. And so just by asking those questions, or helping people to recognize the importance of those questions and taking time to experience being on the receiving end of some of those more gratitude focused questions, is really impactful often. And it's very simple, doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it's very worthwhile doing. And one of the things I love about working with gratitude is that it's something that has a wider impact in a number of ways. I think if we can get better at being more grateful ourselves, and then that becomes evident to the people around us, then they are more likely, again, through that ripple effect, to notice the good things around them, but also around the communication between people. So in the exercises we do, where we ask people to give feedback to somebody else, to a colleague, for example, around the things that they are grateful for in that person and the things they appreciate about them, then there's a double benefit that goes on there, because it's not only a lovely thing and a valuable thing for that person to receive in terms of all those messages of appreciation and support, which is, of course, important, because many people don't feel appreciated at work, even if they might actually be appreciated. They often don't realize, because they don't get told. So that's really important, that the person receives the messages of gratitude and appreciation. But by asking the question in the first place, we're actually also helping the person who is giving that feedback, because we're helping them to reframe that relationship with that person, to think about the positives that they recognize in them and appreciate in them. And that can be really powerful in terms of the impact on that relationship between those two people. But in a collective, in a team, for example, when we have these conversations going on in all different directions, it can really take them to a much more positive place, a more supportive place, where they can perform at a higher level because of that mutual respect that they've shared, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I wanted to ask you something from a psychologist standpoint. One of the things that I've seen that works great, and it's related to what you just said. For instance, when we have holidays and we're meeting with friends or family, sometimes we're meeting with people that we like. Sometimes we're meeting with people that we don't like as much, or that aren't as pleasant all the time. And one of the things that I've seen work really, really well for me and for the people that I've shared this with is, before actually going to a place or receiving guests, to think about 3 things that we appreciate about the person, about each person that is either coming or we are going to interact with. And it's very interesting how the relationship shifts when you do that. And I was curious if there is something from the things that you know, some scientific finding or something like this that relates to this. Why is it working? I'm curious if you have some kind of an answer for this.
Yeah, well, I think it's hugely powerful, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's easy to maybe sometimes think about what you appreciate about people you like, because they're maybe a bit more like you, and very often the things that we notice about other people where relationships don't go so well is around those differences, because things don't connect so well. We don't relate to their way of thinking or the way they see the world, and the way they behave sometimes jars with us, because we would rather they did it a bit differently, and it makes us a bit uncomfortable. And so very often those interpersonal challenges that we face are because of differences between our own preferences and styles and those of the other people that we're dealing with. And so naturally, as human beings, we have a negativity bias, unfortunately, but it's there for good reason. We need to be alert to problems and danger so we can act fast if we need to make a decision about running away or fighting the beast, whatever that threat is that's coming our way. But we can learn how to focus more on the things that are working well. And the kind of questions you just described there are really, really valuable because it's simple to do if you know to do it. And most of us won't. We were just in a situation as we're recording this now where certainly in the UK, we're starting to open up again after coronavirus, and we're starting to see people again that we haven't seen for a long time. And many of those relationships will be very positive. But as you say, you'll be meeting friends and family and colleagues who you haven't seen for a long time. And some of those encounters might be slightly challenging, or what you might be a bit fearful about that because, or nervous because maybe those relationships aren't so positive all the time. But I think the real power of it is the questions you ask there. I think that's the key thing. In any situation, as human beings, we can only process a small amount of the information that's around us because there's stimulation in every direction, isn't there? We're being bombarded by messages on social media and on our email and on the news, and then even just in the physical environment, there's always more things that we can pay attention to than we actually can. And so we have to choose. And the questions we ask help us to decide what to notice. And in what you just described, that's a really lovely way of helping us to notice the good things in those people, because they will be there. In the vast majority of cases, there will be some good things that we can appreciate about that person. It's just most of the time that's not what we notice, because we notice the things that jar and make us a bit uncomfortable, which are usually the differences. But I think when we start asking those questions, then actually it doesn't take long before we realize actually there are benefits in those differences. It would be a bit boring, wouldn't it, if we were all the same? So then if we can start thinking about the value of difference between us, then that really opens us up to thinking, well, yeah, maybe it's a bit difficult sometimes, but that comes with benefits too, because they're so different. And then likewise, that might mean that there are things about us that they would appreciate because we're different to them. So I know it's not focused on the science of it so much, but I think the principle of that is to keep it simple and seek those opportunities to just to reset or set a different focus of attention when you're coming into a situation like that that might otherwise be a bit challenging. So yeah, I love the way you position that. I think that's a really valuable and simple tool that any of us can apply if we get into that habit. And of course, that's the challenge, is doing it repeatedly so that it becomes a habit.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually one of the purposes of the Gratitude Podcast, to help people get new ideas of and actually help implement some habits, some positive habits, some habits, of course, that have to do with gratitude into their life. And I believe they make a big difference when we are able to actually reach that level of habit, because we have all kinds of habits, whether we are conscious of them or not. And cultivating a positive habit can have many benefits for a longer period in time. But I also wanted to get to something else that I'm really curious about. What have been some of the most surprising experiences that you had when you did the gratitude exercises in companies? Of course, if you can share them.
Yeah, well, one of the activities that we use very often is using strengths cards. So we produced a deck of strengths cards a few years ago now. They're under the brand of At My Best. And the strengths cards are really simple. So we've got photographs on one side, and we've got single word strengths on the other side. So things like caring and decisive and flexible. So they're really, really simple and accessible. And we designed them because we wanted people to have a way of connecting with what their own strengths are, but also what the strengths are of the other people around them. But we knew that if we asked the open-ended question about when are you at your best, or when is this other person at their best, that many of us would struggle to answer those questions because we're just not used to being asked those things generally. And also we don't really have a frame of reference and a structure to make sense of that kind of question. Whereas if we provide a stimulus like that, we can very quickly work through those words or those photographs and think about, does this represent something I can see as a strength in that person? And so it works really well at helping people to say, well, yeah, maybe it's these things actually that I recognize as a strength. So one of the ways that we use those cards that is every time is a really special thing to do actually with a group of people who know each other, is to get them to share not only to do the activity not only for themselves but for each of the people that they work with. So we will sit around a table and we will have the spotlight, as it were, falling on each person. So if we were now thinking of you, Georgian, we'd be around a table, we'd each of us be choosing a card that we thought reflected a quality that we recognized in you and saw in you in your work. And then each of us in turn would just take a moment to say, here's the card I've chosen, and this is what it means. This is why I've chosen that. And so what we hear on the back of that is usually very, very quick examples of how people have recognized this strength in action. And so it doesn't take long to do at all, but it's really impactful. And it's typically things like, do you remember last Tuesday when this disaster project happened and we were all really stressed, and then you were the one who said to us that we've done this before and reminded us that actually we have got the ability in our team to be able to pull through this, and you were really calm. And so I might share with you that calm is the card I picked for you, and this is why. And so often his sort of doesn't ever really stop being a surprise in some ways, even though we've seen it many times before. The reaction from the person receiving this feedback is one of defensiveness and also kind of disbelief in a way. So very often people will say, well, that's not a strength. That's not special. That's just me. Mm-hmm. And what you always see in that example is everybody else getting very animated, saying, yes, exactly. Yeah, that's you. and that is special because you're the one in this team that does that. And we all really appreciate that. We value that. And so you have this kind of moment where people, you can see them thinking, oh, okay, I didn't think that was special. I just thought that was ordinary. But because for them, that's just the way they do things. And it feels ordinary because for them, it's not that difficult. It's just something that they do. But other people will look at that and with some kind of degree of envy and think, oh, I wish I could be like Georgian because he's so calm. And, that, so yeah, it's a shame in a way. It's lovely when they kind of realize and they open up to receiving those messages. And you do have to be prepared to engage in those conversations, I think, to be open to receiving that gratitude. But it's still a little bit surprising or disappointing, I think, when people don't already, especially when they're getting into their later years and been in their careers for a few decades, and they still maybe don't naturally recognize something that is a strength of theirs and other people recognize and appreciate in them.
That's so interesting, and I'm sure that many of our listeners are in the same position. I know I am, and I'm surprised when people sometimes tell me different things, good things. But yeah, I think it's something that's very necessary and very powerful that we don't usually do, because the way business works and even life in general is just focusing on solutions, on the problems, on the solutions, on the things that need to be done. And few of us actually take the time to celebrate, to appreciate the people that made things happen, or that helped us one way or another. And I think it's something really important. Because
it's really important.
Yeah.
And so many people leave their jobs because they don't feel appreciated.
Mm.
And so often, people only really find out how appreciated they are when they're leaving. It's at the leaving party, and there's a presentation from the boss, and the boss says, how wonderful this person is, and they sit there thinking, really, I've never heard this before. And that's a real shame, isn't it? And there's so many times when people feel something that actually isn't true because they are just appreciated, but for whatever reason, it's a bit uncomfortable sometimes, I think, to tell somebody this stuff unless you've got a good reason. And so, therefore, the result is that they don't realize how appreciated they are. And that's such a waste. I think that's a real shame of it because sometimes then by the time you tell them, if you ever get the chance to tell them, it's too late. I think if we can all learn to get a bit more comfortable with sharing these things and creating opportunities to share these moments of gratitude and appreciation, and I think that can really help.
Totally. And like you mentioned, I think this is sad, but it's also very interesting just to see how we work as humans. Sometimes probably many would have stayed at their job if they knew, if only someone said that they are appreciated. And I was curious if you've seen why, for instance, managers weren't sharing their appreciation, because I think that can be something that maybe even our listeners that are employees in companies might be going through. They might be appreciated, but they might have a manager that is hesitant to show them their appreciation. What has been your experience with this?
Yeah, I think there's a mix of things, but very often it's just time. And that's the excuse that people have is, I don't have time to think about that. I'm trying to focus on doing the best I can. And as a manager, there are always too many things to do. So people think that they prioritize, and they prioritize the problems because they're the things that shout loudest. There's something that needs to be fixed. But when they realize actually that these things don't take a lot of time at all, and you can actually build them into your regular management practices, then very much more, they're prepared to give it a try. Because, most people do recognize that feeling the kind of positive emotion that goes with these kind of questions and these kind of conversations is worthwhile. And so they sort of often jump at the chance to give it a try and to build these practices into their one-to-one conversations or even their team meetings around sharing good news and focusing on what's working well. But yeah, so I think it's been busy, but it's also this kind of natural tendency that I mentioned earlier to focus on the negative that we all have, so you have to kind of fight against that a bit really and build those habits. And historically, I guess it's never been that high on management training programs to tell people about the importance of showing appreciation to people. But increasingly, I think that's starting to change, and there's recognition that if you can appreciate them, then they're more likely to stay, and they're more likely to work at their best because they don't feel the fear in the same way that they might if they feel that they're being watched and they're under threat, maybe. And I think it builds trust as well. So even in situations where maybe you do have to have a difficult conversation and you do have to tell somebody that something they did wasn't good enough or wasn't as good as you'd like it to be, if you're doing that from a place where there is confidence in that relationship and there is trust in that relationship because they feel that they are trusted and they are appreciated, then I think very often they're more open to receiving the critical feedback because they know that you've got their back, that they do want you to be at their best because you've had that conversation with them already several times. And so often it does make me laugh actually when we're having conversations around positive feedback at work. So many of us have this expectation when we're receiving positive feedback, we're sat there waiting for the negative because we've all been brought up on this kind of sandwich technique that was a big part of management training years ago, where you kind of put bad news between two pieces of good news. And so very often, even when you're receiving positive messages from your manager, you're sat there thinking, okay, what's the real story here? What is it you really want to tell me? Where's the bad news? And so then you don't engage with the positive so much because you think it's just there to serve a purpose that isn't to help you. So we're all about having some conversations which are just about the positive. Let's just focus on what strengths we've noticed, what we appreciate about them, how have they and when have they been at their best? How can we help them be at their best even more? And then there isn't the bit that's kind of like, oh, and if you could just change this about yourself, we'd all like that. Thanks very much. It's actually just about the positives. And then that's when you start to get the benefits of the stronger relationships and the trust and the sense of being appreciated.
With colorful, high-quality, vibrant designs and unique laser-cut shapes, the Unidragon puzzles keep you engaged and create beautiful moments with family or friends that you can cherish together. It's also an effective stress reliever for when you want a quick break from the hustle and bustle of daily life. Go to georgianbenta.com/Unidragon or visit the link in the description for a 10% discount directly on Amazon with promo code GRATIT2021 for all Unidragon puzzles. Check out the reviews. People are loving them. Yeah, I think it's so interesting how we function as humans. I like to give this example of refrigerator and any appliance actually. It works most of the time. Sometimes it doesn't, but when it doesn't, it's so annoying that we forget that the rest of the 364 days it's working, and I think it's somehow similar in our relationships as well. And at work, especially when there are all kinds of problems, all kinds of things going on, we focus so much on the problems and maybe on the person that maybe made a mistake or something that we forget the rest of the 364 days in which everything was great, actually, or most of the things were great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we do need to remind ourselves, don't we? We habituate very quickly as human beings. We kind of very quickly get used to our new circumstances when things are working well. It's like, if you got a Ferrari next week or something, you might love that for a few weeks, but before long you'll start noticing other cars which are nicer and better than yours, or a nicer color than yours, and you forget that 3 years ago you were driving a really rubbish car that was covered in rust, So we too easily kind of get used to our current environment and take things for granted. So we need to remind ourselves sometimes and ask these questions just to appreciate what's already there.
Exactly. And I think it's something that's very important to do, and very so like there is this saying with be the change you want to see in the world. We can be the people that are doing that and that are bringing that to the world and are appreciating other people. And I know that you have a tool for that too, not just for business but also for everyday people. And I think we've talked a little bit about this before, about how it came to be, and I think it has a really interesting story if you want to share it with us.
Yeah, so I described the exercise with the strengths cards a few minutes ago, where we can sit around a table and get people to share the things that they appreciate and value in each other. And a few years ago, we kind of recognized just how much impact that had and how useful it was. And we thought that it might be nice to create an online version of that exercise. So there's, as some of you will know, there's a management tool called 360-degree feedback, and it's used very often in large organizations, especially to help people to get feedback from all of those people around them. So they'll get feedback from their boss, and they'll get feedback from their peers and from the people who are reporting to them, and sometimes from their customers too. And very often these tools are numerically based, and so people providing the feedback will rate a number of questions. It might be 60 questions or 100 questions, and they have to rate on a 1 to 5 scale, for example, how good they think you are at that particular thing. And then they'll often add some comments in as well about things that they think you're doing well and the things that they think you could be doing better at. And we saw an opportunity to create something that was more positively focused, because we know from experience of the work we've done with organizations in the past that so often 360-degree feedback can actually leave quite a negative impact on people, because they've had often anonymous feedback and they've had comments from people about something that they find frustrating about them or difficult about them, or they wish they would do differently. And that can really have a significant impact for years to come, because they remember the comments and they're sometimes second guessing who it was who said these terrible things about them, sometimes in capital letters, and it's not a great experience. So we wanted to create a 360 feedback tool that was based on just on strengths, so that there wasn't that kind of and or but kind of question in there. It was all about what is it you appreciate and value. And that's been a lovely thing. So, I mean, that's called At My Best 360. And you can see that at mybest.com if you wanted to go and have a look at that for yourself. But that's designed as a tool for people to get feedback from the people around them, whether that be at home or at work. In fact, actually doing both is really valuable, so you can see what kind of strengths do people at home appreciate in you, and is that different to the strengths that your colleagues see in you. So you can ask up to 12 people to give you feedback, and they will choose the cards. So they choose between 4 and 8 words from the word side of the strengths cards, and they explain why they've chosen those cards, why that was particularly relevant for you and the strengths they see in you. And they can also choose between 1 and 3 photos that are a visual metaphor for the strengths that they recognize in you. So it's been a lovely tool, and people have really appreciated doing it, and that's all good. But actually, one of the things we found with it is it's sometimes a bit difficult to ask for feedback about yourself when you're only asking about strengths. It's more commonplace to say, can you give me some feedback? And I want some good stuff, and I want to know the things I can do differently. And that can be helpful, of course, but it's a bit more difficult in a way to say, hey guys, can you tell me what's great about me, in the nicest possible way? But what's more common and more comfortable is to want to do that for somebody else, so that you can gather that feedback for somebody else and then share it with them, so they can learn what other people value in them and appreciate in them. And sometimes when people most need to hear those things, maybe the times when they're perhaps least likely to go and ask for that feedback themselves, because they're struggling a little bit in some way, or they're finding something difficult. And so we had a few people who were very keen to go through At My Best 360, but for somebody else. And sometimes, although our system wasn't designed to do that, it was very much designed for the individual to own that process of collecting the feedback. We had a few people who would kind of bend the system to gather feedback for their husband, for example, and then share the feedback with him once it had all been collected. And on the back of that experience, we thought there was something really special in that. The idea of gathering together all the messages of love and appreciation and gratitude for that person, and kind of compiling them in some way so that they could look at that, because we know then sometimes that's just a really valuable thing to go back and look at, and to remind yourself, actually, there are things people like about me, and that they can see qualities in me that maybe sometimes I don't always see in myself. So on the back of that, we thought, well, let's create something that's more suited to that kind of aim, that is intended to give to somebody else. And so really that felt much more like a gift than a professional development tool, if you like. So we created something completely different, which is called Woohoo You. And it's a book. And the process is very similar to At My Best 360. So there's a structured process we guide people through. But it enables you as an individual to create a book for somebody else that you want to feel appreciated and valued, and invite up to 40 people to go through a structured process where they can then share those messages of appreciation. And what you get out at the end of it is a book with all these amazing messages, of love and appreciation. So effectively, it's like having maybe 20 gratitude letters from different people in your life, all collated into one book that you can keep on your shelf and treasure forever. It's quite a special thing. We're really pleased to have been able to bring it to life in the last year or two.
I think this is a wonderful idea, and it's very close to what I'm promoting here on the podcast. The fact that it's important for us to let the people in our life know that they are appreciated, and also help them see how appreciated they are as well. And I'm talking a lot about this because it's really something that we're all actually seeking, to feel, to have a sense of purpose, and to know that the work that we're doing and the things that we're doing for other people are actually appreciated. Our efforts are appreciated, and us as human beings are appreciated. And having such a tool and being able to give such a gift, I think it's worth a lot more than many expensive gifts that aren't personalized at all, that are just great as objects, as things. But from my point of view, such a gift has an immense value, and can really be cherished for many years, and can be very helpful as gratitude in general. Whenever you feel down, you can read some of the things that people have said about you, that they appreciate about you. And also when you feel great, you can read about them and rejoice even more. And I think that's something really beautiful that I believe every person on the planet should have something like this in their bookshelf.
Yeah, it would be amazing, wouldn't it? And there's a lot of personalized gifts available, aren't there, these days? But most of them, I think, are really quite superficial because it's just putting someone's name on something very generic. And this really does feel like the ultimate kind of personalized gift, really, because it's not easy to do, actually. We make it as easy as possible with our system, with our platform, to enable people to invite others to contribute to a book. But it does take time. It takes effort. And so, it's not your quick gift that you buy on, from the service station on the way to see somebody for their birthday. This is something that takes usually a few weeks to do, to put together, and a lot of time and thought goes into it. But of course, the impact is so much greater because of that. And people often, I think, really value the opportunity to say these things because we typically don't. I was kind of saying earlier, I think, about how often people don't share these messages, and I think in part because it just feels a bit awkward. When's the right time to just say to somebody, I think you're great, and this is why I think you're great. I think certainly in the UK, I think people would look at you a bit strange if you just had that conversation kind of randomly in the middle of the day. But when there's a special occasion like somebody's birthday, a major birthday, or a leaving, they're moving to a new job, or they're retiring or something like that, then we can mark those moments in time with an opportunity to say, let's take stock and let's share the things that make you so special. Because the reality, of course, is that so often these are the things that are said at someone's funeral. And that just seems like such a waste, doesn't it? That it's only in those moments when these things are said, and you just know that so often the person who's died never heard those things, or certainly not in the way that they would be shared at a funeral. So I love the fact that we're creating ways for people to hear this stuff and realize how much they're loved, while they're still here to appreciate it or benefit from that appreciation.
Exactly. And I've done something similar because I really love the idea, and the impact is wonderful. but it's not easy to do at all. It's
Yeah.
if you don't have a structure or a system, it's really hard to get the feedback from everyone, and structure it yourself, and you really need to get involved quite a lot to do this. And the fact that Martin has created this structure, this system, I think it's something amazing. And like I said, I really believe that the way, in the way that people have a TV, most of the people have a TV in their home. They should have something like this as well, and or at least have the opportunity to give it as a gift to people in their life. It's something that I believe can have a really beautiful impact, and I'm sure that you as gratitude seekers know this already, and I really hope that you will choose to go for it, and to give this experience to the loved ones in your life. And yeah, I believe it's something that can have a huge impact, and for many years. And like Martin said, the fact that sometimes people hear these beautiful things about themselves, or actually they don't get to hear them because we don't say them before they go. I think it's something that should make us think. For many of us, we just don't have that structure. We don't have that opportunity. And one of the other things that I love about Woohoo is the fact that you have it in print, and we have so many emails and messages and videos and pictures and all kinds of things that are abundant, let's say, in our life. But having something that's physical, that we can touch and that we can look through, that we can smell, that we can experience with our hands, I think that makes for something really special. And yeah, I'm really glad that this kind of a product exists. And yeah, I hope that many of you will take it. To make it even easier for you, I will be creating a link, georgianbenta.com/woohoo, and you will be able to just click on that link, or just type it, and you will be able to start your book. It's going to take a while, so like Martin said, it might take a few weeks. If you're thinking about giving it to someone, let's say in at the end of June or in July, it's best that you act right now, because it will take a while, but it's totally worth it.
Yeah, it takes a while for people just to kind of get their thoughts together about how they want to respond, and how they want to write their message to go in the book. And we have had people do it very quickly, but generally, that takes a bit of persistence on the part of the organizer to be chasing people and encouraging them to kind of do it as fast as they can. So you don't want to allow too long, because equally we all know that experience. If you leave it a long time for people to respond to something, then they will take as long as you give them. But so typically we say that it's 2 to 3 weeks for that process of people to collate those or receive those contributions from everybody that they've invited. And it depends how many people you want to invite. So, I mean, we typically have 10, 12 people contribute to a book with their messages, but it can be as high as 40. So obviously the more people you have, then the longer it might take to get everything back from those people. Yeah, I wanted to mention, you talked about the value of having something like this in a tactile, tangible form, like a printed book, and that's something that we really wanted to make sure we tapped into and make it a quality book as well. So we've got a great printers in the UK. It's actually one of the it's a company that does the bookbinding for the Queen of England. So they're a good quality company, and so we're pleased to be partnering with them to kind of produce the books. And so we have a simple printed version that they produce for us, but we also have a hand-bound linen covered version as well, which is really special. So yeah, there's it does make it something that feels like like you say, something you want to keep on your shelf forever and get out and look at on a regular basis. And people tell us that they have, the ones who've produced the books. In the last few months, we've had some amazing feedback about the impact it has, not just on the person who's received it, but also on the person who's organized it and the people who've contributed to it. And that's one of the things I love most about this as a tool or a gift, really, is that it's a gift that gives to many people. It's not just for the person who receives it, because we're giving everybody who's involved the chance to stop and appreciate and be grateful for that person. And that's something I love really about this, and seeing what comes out at the end of it. It's been a real privilege from my point of view to be able to read through some bits of these books as they've been produced. And I can tell you, there are a lot of wonderful people in the world. When you read these kind of comments about somebody you've never met, never heard of, and you can see just why they're appreciated by people, and all the amazing sort of thanks and messages that they've written. I only get a small insight to these things when I'm sort of checking through for quality, really. But it makes me often think, I wish I was this person's friend, because they sound amazing.
Yeah, that's so nice. That's so nice. And by the way, you mentioned some of the feedback that you had. Can you share maybe a story or two from people that have ordered this book?
Yeah, well, I was on a call just the other day actually with a lady whose friend has done a book. So the lady that I know introduced her friend to the idea. She completed a book for a relative of hers, and she just read out a text message to me, and it said something like, I sorry, but I can't speak to you at the moment. Probably not for a few days, but by the end of the week, I think I might have composed myself enough to be able to talk to you, but I'm just too overcome with the emotion of reading through the book. People often tell us that they've been in tears when they've read the book, or that the person receiving it has been. And occasionally we receive videos or people post on social media videos of them having just opened a book. And there's one we had maybe a year ago with a lady who has a pretty large following on Instagram, and my phone started going mad. One morning I got out of the shower and it just had message after message, or notification on Instagram about people following our account or liking our posts. And it was all because this lady had just opened her book and who was in floods of tears in this video, or several videos actually. She did one after the other, where she was just completely overcome by the lovely messages that her colleagues and friends and family had shared with her, because it was just at a time that I think lots was going on in her life. She was having a difficult time, was under a lot of pressure, and then just to kind of receive something like that at the right time. Sometimes these things just work out, don't they? You receive them at the moment you most need them. And that was the case for her. So it's quite special when you see that, because you can't fake that. People often talk about things being special, but when you see people kind of turning into a kind of emotional wreck, then you kind of know there's something more to it than just a superficial gratitude.
Exactly. And like you mentioned, I think it can be a great gift for people, not just for their birthday or for special occasions, but just to support them, and when they're maybe not having the easiest time in their life. I think that can be a great way of showing support to someone, to know that they have people around them that they can rely on, that care about them, that appreciate them. I think that can be another great moment to give this gift to people, because sometimes we, on our birthdays, we receive all kinds of messages, and um, with habituation we just we don't enjoy them as much, possibly. But when we receive such a gift, without having without being something special, without being a birthday or something, I think it can be also a really great idea, just to be there for people and to support them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, wonderful. So thank you very much for being here with us and for creating such a beautiful product. And gratitude seekers, go to georgianbanta.com/woohoo, and there you will be able to choose the kind of book you want. You have several choices to make, several colors, several finishes, and you can choose however many people you want to contribute to the book that you want to give as a gift. So I definitely encourage you to take this chance, to take this opportunity to enrich your life and enrich the life of the people around you as well. Martin, thank you very much.
You're welcome, and it's been a pleasure to be here. And I hope that those of you listening who want to create a book, I hope you enjoy the experience of putting it together. And I should just mention, we do ship internationally, but do allow a bit extra time for that, because I know at the moment, especially with the problems we have around the world, that these things can take a while. So if it is for a special occasion, make sure you allow as much time as possible just to be safe. But yeah, thank you, Georgian. It's been a pleasure talking to you.